Hey, all, Scott here, inviting you to check out Modern Times Magazine at moderntimesmagazine.com. It's a great little independent publication out of Phoenix, Arizona, featuring unique views on economics, politics, foreign policy, sports, and music, with great art scene coverage and fiction writing as well. That's Modern Times Magazine at moderntimesmagazine.com. All right, you guys, welcome back to the thing here. I'm Scott Horton. This is my show. Next up is the great Ray McGovern. For 27 years, he was an analyst at the CIA, and he was the morning briefer for Vice President H.W. Bush in the 1980s, and he's the co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, which is asking a lot. Sorry, I've worn that one out. And let's see, he also speaks and writes. He writes at consortiumnews.com and at raymcgovern.com, and he's got a whole gigantic archive going back for years and years at antiwar.com and a lot of other places as well. And right now he's actually, I believe, in the middle of going around and doing a speaking tour promoting peace and freedom in one way or another over there. So welcome back to the show, Ray. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I'm just promoting a little bit of truth. I'm trying to give truth a chance here, and I'm in Missouri, Kansas, and Arkansas, and really glad to be in the heartland here because it's quite different from being in the Beltway.
Yeah, good times. Well, I'm sure you're learning them well. So here, learn me some stuff. Let's talk about Ukraine. This Barbara Starr, here she is. She's on CNN International right now.
If it were to happen, would fundamentally change the calculus entirely.
Yeah, calculus. God, I hate that calculus. I wish somebody would tell them to stop saying calculus. God, it's the worst thing in the world. But anyway, what she's really saying is that Putin's getting ready to invade East Ukraine. Is that true, Ray? What do you think?
I don't think so, Scott. I flunked calculus, but nothing I know about Putin would suggest
optics, too. That's the one I hate even more than calculus is optics. Just say how this looks, okay? Just how this looks is fine.
All right. Well, let me just cite one of my favorite columnists, who happens to be George Will. I make a joke, of course. But today in the Washington...
We know what that F stands for.
Well, I'm not going to say that. But George Will today in the Washington Post, which, of course, is the neoconservative Pravda, says something really interesting. What he says is this. He says, Putin says that he doesn't need to go into eastern Ukraine. And, that's really suspicious because that shows that he arrogates to himself the right to go into eastern Ukraine, and you better watch out. Now, what Putin said happens to be the fact. He doesn't need to go into eastern Ukraine, and as he watches $17 billion going into the western Ukraine, so much the better. Let them have all the money they want from the West. Ukraine is not going to be going into NATO anytime soon. As a matter of fact, if sensible people come to their senses, Ukraine will find a status very much like Finland, where they can prosper. They have all manner of natural resources there. The black earth. That's why Monsanto is very much interested in getting in there. In any case, there is a solution here, but it requires adult people to sit around a table. And it'll probably be another few weeks, if not months, before Obama is able to get to the adults around and say, okay, we're not going to dislodge Putin from the Crimea, which apparently he said today. Now, let's see what we can do. I'm not so worried about the Russian troops. I am worried about you know what I'm going to say here, Islamic terrorists. And so Obama has already started trying to distance himself from the more crazy people.
Mm-hmm. Well, so that's good. And I guess, John Kerry, well, how significant is this that John Kerry had agreed with Lavrov that, yeah, maybe we do need to rewrite the Ukrainian constitution to have some more federalism and some less centralism and that kind of thing? Are they really going to do that? Or is just that rhetorically means uncle,
Well, I shouldn't point out, well, I shouldn't have to point out, as Ukrainians have to be involved in this process, obviously, and other stakeholders in that area. But it does make sense It does make sense to sit down and say, okay, look, there are various interests here. There are big divisions in Ukraine. And let's come to a settlement where Russia doesn't feel threatened, where the West can back off gracefully, because it's not the schoolyard of the West here, and they should have known that to begin with, and that a kind of a situation very much like Finland could obtain. There's nothing standing in the way of that, and it would be to the benefit of everyone, first and foremost, the Ukrainians.
Hey, Ray. Sorry to interrupt you, but you keep hitting a button there.
Okay, I got it on a different ear now.
Okay,
Sorry.
Good. Yeah, you're beeping on us.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm just saying that this is not an intractable situation here. That all that needs to happen is for the neoconservatives to say, well, okay, we tried. We tried to reach even more eastward with NATO, and it didn't work. We should take solace in the fact that we caused a lot of poison in the relationship between Russia and the United States. That's all to our good, because maybe Russia won't be so helpful to the United States anymore in preventing things that we want, like U.S. military strike on Syria. So that's the bottom line here. What Victoria Nuland, in passing out those chocolate chip cookies on Independence Square in Kiev, what she was really trying to do was incite what happened, namely the overthrow of the duly elected government. However corrupt it was elected. Yanukovych had to leave, and then, of course, with that incredible intercepted telephone conversation where she tells our U.S. ambassador in Kiev, look, we want Yats. Yats is our guy. By all reasonable experience, and I've been around Washington for 50 years now, I confess, when an intercepted conversation like that goes forward, indicating that the Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs is plotting a coup against the duly elected government, this time in Ukraine, one would have thought that by any decent standards or respect for the opinions of mankind, that they wouldn't pick the same guy to be the interim prime minister. But what do you find? Yikes! It's Yats. Yatsenyuk comes in as the interim prime minister, and Nuland has already said, well, he's our guy because, he used to be head of the central bank. He knows what the IMF needs, and he'll kind of wean Ukraine into the Western orbit so that the Ukrainian workers can suffer the same fate as the ones in Greece right now, and they'll pay back all their loans with lots of austerity. And sure enough, what Yatsenyuk said, the first thing he got up, he said, I'm prepared to commit political suicide. Everybody's like, what do you mean? I'm prepared to commit political suicide because the austerity measures that I'm going to insist on are going to make it impossible for me to have a political career here. Whoa. So what's afoot here is very transparent. Nuland, she's overdone herself. And I think Obama is beginning to realize that these people really don't have U.S. interests at heart. Where are the U.S. interests in the Ukraine other than giving Russia a bloody nose? And why do anybody want to make? Why do any people want to make a bloody nose in Moscow? Well, so the Russians won't cooperate with us on issues of more concern to the neoconservatives, and that is Syria. What they would like to see is U.S. military involvement in Syria to prevent Bashar al-Assad from continuing to win.
All right, now wait a minute. Wait. Yeah. I'm so interested in that topic. But before we go that direction with it, are you sure that Ukraine itself and maybe somehow, bringing them into NATO, I mean, rewind a few weeks back before Putin checkmated their sorry asses and everything, but just is it possible their plan really was that, oh no, we're going to do another Orange Revolution, only it's going to stick this time, and we're really going to separate Ukraine from Russia and maybe even eventually deny them their base in Crimea? Or they just wanted Putin to think that so that he would freak out and cause a crisis, and then that then would lead to the theory you're talking about, that they just wanted to cause a crisis more than they wanted to actually win that influence in Ukraine. Is that what you're saying? Do I have that?
Well, I'm saying, Scott, that it's not an either-or thing. it's a win-win situation. If by some quirk of fate, Putin says, well, Ukraine really isn't all that important to me. Yeah, it can join Leighton. It can join NATO. Well, they win. If he says no, if in response to some threats from the new Ukrainian leaders saying that, maybe we'll kick the Russians out of the Crimea, Putin does what everyone might expect him to do, take back Crimea. Well, they still win, because then there's a poisoned relationship between not only Moscow and Washington, but Moscow and the rest of the Western world. It's not going to last very long, as long as people realize. Now, one thing I'll point out is that there are a couple of European statesmen left in the world, and one of them's name is Helmut Schmidt. Okay, he was the Bundeskanzler, the head of Germany at a time when Bush wanted to have a coalition of the willing to start a war of aggression against Iraq, and Helmut Schmidt put Bush's nose out of joint by saying, you may have a coalition of the willing, but I am unwilling, okay? Now, what did Schmidt say to Die Zeit yesterday, one of the major German newspapers? He said, what Putin did was, in his words, durchaus verständlich, okay? Verständlich means understandable, durchaus means thoroughly. And, anybody who would have thought that Putin would have acted any differently would have to have his head examined.
All right, now we'll have to hold it right there and take this dumb break here, but we'll be right back with the great Ray McGovern from RayMcGovern.com right after this. Hey, y'all, Scott here. First, I want to take a second to thank all the show's listeners, sponsors, and supporters for helping make the show what it is. I literally couldn't do it without you. And now I want to tell you about the newest way to help support the show. Whenever you shop at Amazon.com, stop by ScottHorton.org first, and just click the Amazon logo on the right side of the page. That way, the show will get a kickback from Amazon's end of the sale. It won't cost you an extra cent. And it's not just books. Amazon.com sells just about everything in the world, except cars, I think. So whatever you need, they've got it. Just click the Amazon logo on the right side of the page at ScottHorton.org, or go to ScottHorton.org/Amazon. All right, guys, welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. This is my show. I'm on the line with Ray McGovern, and we're talking about what's going on in Ukraine. America picked this fight, and Ray, where we got interrupted by the break, you were talking about how the former chancellor of Germany was saying, come on, man, what do you expect Putin to do? Only in German.
Yeah, he said in German, in English, he said this is in durchaus means thoroughly verständlich, thoroughly understandable. What he's saying is anyone who would have thought that Putin would stand by and let this happen, and particularly would let threats be made to for the new leadership, so to speak, in Ukraine to take over the Crimea or to drive the Russians out of it. The Crimea has been Russia since the Articles of Confederation in this country. It was Catherine the Great at the end of the 18th century who consolidated Russian rule over that entire area, the Ukraine and Crimea, and that's where the Russian Black Sea Fleet started during her reign, and that's the only really ice-free port that they have, and they can work their influence through the Mediterranean pretty far away from their bases in the Black Sea there at Sevastopol. So it is, Helmut Schmidt is an experienced politician and statesman, and what he said is, what we need is Zusammenarbeit, okay? Zusammen is together. Arbeit, we know, means work. We got to work together. We got to zusammensetzen, okay? We got to sit down together and work this thing out. And, he's speaking for a major ally there in Germany, and I think he's kind of showing up Angela Merkel, who is doing this kind of puppet act where Obama says jump, and she jumps as far as she thinks he wants. And this is running pretty thin in Germany. The Süddeutsche Zeitung, which is the best newspaper, in my view, in Europe, much less in Germany. It's in Munich, and it does a terrific job. It said about 2 months ago, Ist der Präsident verrückt? Now, for those of your audience who know what verrückt is, it means crazy, but it means crazy in an incredibly deeper, more pernicious way. If you say, du bist verrückt, That is the supreme insult. And if you give a little sign, it's a finger to the head, not the middle finger, but the index finger, on the Autobahn, that is a criminal offense because it means du bist verrückt, and it's something you can bring to court and say, this guy called me crazy. So for the establishment paper, this is, you have to, the establishment paper, the Süddeutsche Zeitung, to pose the question, is der Präsident, and they mean Obama, of course, verrückt? That's a change. That's a sea change in West German or German now attitudes toward the United States, and for the president to continue to rail about sanctions and all this kind of thing. Well, Helmut Schmidt said, "Look, we shouldn't be making threats. We shouldn't be saying sanctions. We should sit down and work this thing out." And again, I think the Finland example is exactly what would fit here. Nobody would lose. And especially the Ukrainians would have a decent chance at a new life. The problem with the Ukrainians, of course, is that they never had a chance at democracy. They never had a chance to cultivate real leaders. And so when they broke away from the Soviet Union, it was the oligarchs. It was the smart people who made the money and were cultivated by U.S. smart people with lots of money. And the corruption was rife. But the West got in there big time. This time, Monsanto better give up its idea of selling its corrupt seeds to corrupt people to cultivate the black earth, which is the breadbasket of that part of Europe, because it ain't going to happen. And Putin's going to make sure it doesn't happen. What needs to happen is for an accommodation to be worked out. And this is not a difficult one. It's simply that the neocons overreached themselves. As I said in my first article on this is one regime change too far. And they better just sit down and work it out.
All right, now, a couple things. Well, three things. First of all, is that going to happen here? Is the Obama administration actually going to negotiate anything or have the UN intervene for them and negotiate or call Joe Biden or whatever it is? And then secondly, what about the Nazis, Svoboda and right sector? How big of a deal is this really? And then thirdly, we still got to talk about before the top of the hour, Dianne Feinstein and the Senate Intelligence Committee versus the CIA. I got to hear what you have to say about that. So talk fast.
Yeah. Well, it will be worked out. We have the president already backing off, He's saying, I'm less concerned about Russian troops than I am about a nuke going off in Manhattan. Well, that's so the byword here. Terrorism is what we're concerned about, not the Russian troops in Ukraine, although, the pundits and the strong anti-Soviet or anti-Russian people continue to beat the drums. So he's also said, and it was today, that we're not thinking about more damaging sanctions right now, unless he goes further, unless he goes into the eastern Ukraine or that kind of thing. So I think it'll be worked out. It's just going to take a lot of time, and it's going to create a lot of temporary damage between the capitals, the Moscow and Washington, and that, of course, was part of the aim of the people like prima donna neocon Victoria Nuland.
All right, and then, so now, I can't find the tweet. I thought I had retweeted it, but I did have a link here to a massive right sector protest where they're demanding, it looked like a pretty big protest there, where they're demanding the resignation of one minister or another. And then there's this article running at antiwar.com today about how the right sector guys who are, people have called them the brown shirts, how they're the police of Kiev. They have seized the city of Kiev. This one it centers on the story of a Swede who's also a Nazi who's traveled to help chip in with these guys. And they've gotten from 5 to 8 high-level positions in the new government. And so what about all of that?
Well, that's a real and present danger, and it's partly due to the messing with the internal affairs there by our celebrated National Endowment for Democracy, which is really the successor to the Covert Action Staff of the CIA. There are neo-Nazis there, and there's incredibly bitter feeling between Russians and those neo-Nazis because they remember Bandera and the rest of them, that when the Germans came into the Soviet Union 1941, who cooperated? Who actually rounded up not only Jews but Ukrainians and others and sent them off to Auschwitz and other places like that? So there's there's terrific bad feeling there. And why Victoria Nuland and other people thought that they could work with this crowd? You know, the enemy of the enemy is my friend. Give me a break. I don't want friends like these.
Yeah. Not always, guys. Just maybe, could be in some circumstances. What the hell kind of rule of thumb is that? All right. And now real quickly here, you're a former CIA officer, so certainly you're taking their side against the evil Senate committee trying to tell the truth about their torture program, right?
No. Provocateur. Not at all. This is very serious business. This is the torture, okay? This is something that the U.S. never descended to before. John Brennan and the people at CIA are still in control, and they are equally guilty of being part of all this. And so small wonder that they would not want to share the real deal, the real information on all this. And so what they've done is spied on the Senate Intelligence Committee and withdrawn some of the incredibly damaging revelations about waterboarding and so forth. It's no surprise to do that. What is surprising is that all of a sudden, Dianne Feinstein, who's been first and foremost a supporter not only of NSA but of the CIA, all of a sudden she gets in high dudgeon. She gets up without warning and says, "Hey, they're spying on me. They're accusing my young people who did this wonderful study of perpetrating a crime." Now, how do you explain that? Well, some people say, some people see the light all too late, but then they finally see it. But I think it's more a matter of emotion here. She's got these young people working for her, right? Uh-huh. They're grandchildren, really, and for her age. And all of a sudden they're accused of a crime. That sort of ticks her off. Now, who's going to win on this? She's not going to win. Obama is much more afraid of John Brennan and his coterie of torturers over there than he is of Grandma Feinstein. So what I predict is this will end up in not a beer summit, because Feinstein's from California, of course. It'll be a wine summit, and she'll get together with John Brennan, and they'll have some wine, and it will all be papered over. Now,
doesn't that show where we are, though, where the CIA thinks they're more than an equal to the U.S. Senate?
Well, that's a sad commentary on all this, isn't it? But that's what we have. We have security services, we have the media, we have the corporations. That's very close to the definition of fascism.
That's Ray McGovern, everybody. RayMcGovern.com and ConsortiumNews.com. Thanks very much, Ray. Appreciate it.
You're most welcome, Scott.
Hey, I'll Scott Horton here for The Future of Freedom, the monthly journal of the Future Freedom Foundation at fff.org/subscribe. Since 1989, FFF has been pushing an uncompromising moral and economic case for peace, individual liberty, and free markets. Sign up now for The Future Freedom, featuring founder and president Jacob Hornberger, as well as Sheldon Richmond, James Bovard, Anthony Gregory, Wendy McElroy, and many more. It's just $25 a year for the print edition, $15 per year to read it online. That's fff.org/subscribe. And tell them Scott sent you.
So you're a libertarian, and you don't believe the propaganda about government awesomeness you were subjected to in 4th grade. You want real history and economics. Well, learn in your car from professors you can trust with Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom. And if you join through the Liberty Classroom link at scotthorton.org, we'll make a donation to support The Scott Horton Show. Liberty Classroom, the history and economics they didn't teach you.
Don't worry about things you can't control. Isn't that what they always say? But it's about impossible to avoid worrying about what's going on these days. The government has used the war on guns, the war on drugs, and the war on terrorism to tear our Bill of Rights to shreds. But you can fight back. The 10th Amendment Center has proven it, racking up major victories. For example, when the U.S. government claimed authority in the NDAA to have the military kidnap and detain Americans without trial, the nullifiers got a law passed in California, declaring the state's refusal to ever participate in any such thing. Their latest project is offnow.org, nullifying the National Security Agency. They've already gotten model legislation introduced in California, Arizona, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas, meant to limit the power of the NSA to spy on Americans in those states. We'd be fools to wait around for the U.S. Congress or courts to roll back Big Brother. Our best chance is nullification and interposition on the state level. Go to offnow.org, print out that model legislation, and get to work nullifying the NSA. The hero Edward Snowden has risked everything to give us this chance. Let's take it. offnow.org. Hey, Scott Horton here to tell you about this great new book by Michael Swanson, The War State. In The War State, Swanson examines how Presidents Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy both expanded and fought to limit the rise of the new national security state after World War II. If this nation is ever to live up to its creed of liberty and prosperity for everyone, we are going to have to abolish the empire. Know your enemy. Get The War State by Michael Swanson. It's available at your local bookstore or at Amazon.com in Kindle or in paperback. Just click the book in the right margin at scotthorton.org or thewarstate.com.